I do think that internet and technology is powerful, but the reality is we live in a very unequal world, and 70% of Africa is offline. So when we say rural areas in Africa, it's 70% of our continent, and that is a complete exclusion of youth who don't have access to that information. Couple of things we've been trying to do. One, these consultations to make them run by youth themselves. So we basically empowered youth through these consultations to be able to run it. So they have a recording of Africa CDC presentation, they have the continental briefing with some of the updated information, and then they can just run it in their own language with their own constituency. And then they send us the report and we bring that to the policy table. Another thing we've been trying to do is which have been proven to be very effective in Ebola outbreak is radio, community radio campaigning. So because people have access to radios and listen to radios and even the most remote areas. So we've been also doing a lot of interviews on radios, but also just recording, some short messages to be distributed and aired. And in the same vein of also learning from Ebola outbreak is to really use some messengers to be the credible champions, because whether we like it or not, in Africa, we have distrust between people and especially youth and institutions, and we have a huge intergenerational gap. So young people do not trust governments and do not trust old men who are deciding for them. And before the pandemic, they were on the streets, challenging these leaders. And now during the lockdown, they're like not collaborating and not following the measures. And so one of the really effective tools used in Ebola outbreak is to use the traditional leaders, the chiefs in the communities, the musicians who are very popular, who do all these, they did amazing songs on Ebola, and now actually some of the songs I'm seeing coming out on coronavirus. And people listen to that, and people trust that, and people collaborate with that because these are trusted leaders, even religious leaders. To your point, Alex, it's really funny to see political leaders diffusing misinformation and themselves not complying by the preventive measures. So we had some leaders in Africa as well who said we need to continue to go to church because we have only God and faith now to rely on this crisis, And so calls like this, it's not trusted, and it doesn't build that trust. But when a religious leader comes out and say, God is whatever you are, and you can practice your faith whatever you are, then people listen. So I think these are some of the measures we've been trying to also work with young leaders in the community to implement. And some of the technology also have been used very creatively. We saw in Rwanda that the government did some drones who are flying around rural areas with the speaker and, informing people about what's happening. It could be scary to some people. What the hell is this? What's going on? But I think we're just trying different creative, crazy things to see how we can cope with the situation. And I think it's just extremely important to reach to our rural areas because they are the majority of our population.